A really great way of enhancing your music production and crafting your own unique sound is to record your very own Foley, organic, atmospheric samples that can add so much depth and interesting texture into your beats. And you can wait for a nice sunny day to do this, but in this video I'm going to be recording some organic, snowy, crunchy textures and showing you some really great ways that you can process the sounds to easily add more depth using some generative methods to just enhance the organic sounds in your tracks, and they really do take your sounds to the next level. So back in the studio, and I've given away the samples that I recorded in this video for free. So the methods that I'll use in this video to utilize the samples allows you to take the samples and essentially use them in any project you want, regardless of the BPM. So it's much easier than working with fixed BPM samples, which may not always work in different projects and keys. So before I do that, I'm going to get the acoustic guitar and get a bass track going so I can lay out some drums on top of it and show you what I mean. So I'm going to try and keep this one nice and organic. So kicking it off with an acoustic guitar. I'm going to record the same thing a couple times, pan it different ways just to get a nice wide sort of textured acoustic guitar sound. And then on top of that, layering in just a nice little piano melody. Again, this one is going to be from Leco, which is in of itself super sort of textured, organic sounding VST. And finally, before we start adding this Foley magic, just going to get a basic drum, kick and snare combo, both of them from my organic Lo-Fi hip hop pack, which has got loads of Foley recordings and stuff like that as well. But this is going to be just a simple kick snare combo, which I can then add some randomized textures to enhance it and keep it super organic and natural feeling. So I've taken the recordings that I made and I've done some basic processing and generated this free sample pack that'll be available in the description down below. So this is some of the sounds, just some one-shot percussive stuff, snapping twigs, walking through the crunchy snow, some snowball sounds, stuff like that. And there's a nice little atmosphere in there as well here, just some birds and wind and stuff like that. And if you like this pack, I would highly recommend checking out my organic Lo-Fi hip hop sample pack. It's got tons more Foley loops, one shots, a lot of processed sounds, and as well as that, it's got the guitars, pianos, vocals, and it's just a great toolkit for making this style of beats. So I'll link the video up here if you want to check out the full video on that pack. But for now, I'm going to show you some tips and tricks on how you can generate some hi-hats and different percussive Foley textures from these sounds in really easy ways. So this was a project so far. I've added the bird sound in there and mixed it with some vinyl noise as well, just to add a bit of background texture. And that's the track so far. So the first thing that I did was I grouped up all the sort of Foley and the snare, and usually I group up all my drums minus the kick so I can process them together. And I've added Lux on there, which is a sort of compression saturation tool that really does enhance the sounds that you throw through it. I've also got a cassette on there by Waves Factory. This is a really nice plugin to add a little bit of the imperfections and the sound profiling of a sort of cassette recorded sound. So those two are on the master bus, sort of helping glue everything together. So the first thing I've done is I wanted to add a little bit more high-end texture to the snare. So I've got this sort of tree Foley wide sample loop, which is just a crunchy sample that's in the pack. And I wanted it to just peak in when the snare hits. So one way of doing that is to go on the snare track and throw on the envelope follower. So if I solo this, you can see whenever a snare hits, you get this little pattern. And you can map that pattern to anything. But what I did was map it to the volume of this one. So then now you get this crunchy sort of texture character that just layers in the top end of the snare. And obviously, because it's a varied sample, as the track progresses, it's always going to be a slightly different sort of sound. And if you want it to be louder, you can sort of throw on a utility or even just increase the volume of the sample. But I want it to be a little bit more subtle. So that's the volume that I used. Next up, I wanted more texture on the mids again. So for this, I've just thrown a few of these samples into a drum rack. And we've got a random velocity in there again, just to add a little bit more variance as the track progresses, a little bit more randomized velocity. And then I've thrown a filter delay on there, and a couple of things are mapped to LFOs. I actually did a very similar technique in my generative video. If you're interested in more generative music methods, check out this video. This was more for making a full track using generative melody, generative drums, and mapping different LFOs and different methods to get sort of randomized sounds that just constantly work in the track. So I would recommend checking that video out if you're interested in that. But yeah, as I say, for this, I've mapped two things to the filter delay. One is the pan. So sometimes it'll delay to the left, sometimes to the right, and the frequency depends on the LFO, and also the frequency that's being delayed by the filter delay. So sometimes it'll be the lower frequency, sometimes it'll be a bit higher. And so as we go through, it moves from different panning because of the panning, and you get different frequencies delayed with a bit of filtering and reverb on there as well. So now we've got a nice varied snare that has lots of different textures for every hit. Next up, I made some generative sample triggers. So this is what it sounds like. So we're getting a nice sort of hi-hat-y texture, quite a soft, crunchy high. So the way I've done that is I've taken the Frosty Walk texture, which is quite a wide sample anyway, and I've thrown it into a sampler. And I've got an arpeggiator on there, and I'm playing different notes, and the arpeggiator is getting triggered by the notes to play different slices of the sample. So effectively what we get is this. We've got different tracks playing different rates. So one in the middle is playing at a different rate to the side ones, which are giving it more width, whereas the middle's more the sort of steady sound. And then all together, drop the volume a little bit so it blends in the mix. Adds a nice crunchy top end, sort of a bit like a shaker sound. And then on the master bus, I've got a glue compressor ducking it away for the kick, just to add a bit more movement and make it sync with the track a bit better. Got spaced out for reverb, some filtering, and also Portal on there with the granular sort of choppy sound that you get by default. Next up, I did a similar thing, but with different sounds. So for this one, I essentially took some of the sounds I liked, added halftime reverb on there, freeze it down and flattened it. So I've got this audio file. And this audio file is what I've dragged into the sampler again for this method. So in the Foley Trigger 2, this is what it sounds like. This is a more crunchy sort of ambient Foley method. And the thing with this is, once you've made it, you can drop it into any track you want because it's not dependent on the BPM. It's dependent on the sort of frequency of triggering the samples in the arpeggiator. So this one here is a 1/1 rate, gate 50%, just a standard Ableton arpeggiator, and it's set to random, so it's not going to repeat in any sort of pattern. So I've got two on here, one's pan left, one's pan right. One's got a Portal with the radial flutter effect, and one has got Portal again with a different effect, the sleep cycle effect. So you've got different granular synthesis in each sort of panning. And yeah, it's just a great way of making these sort of random trigger racks, and you can drag and drop any sample in. You can adjust the sort of the way it's getting sliced. You can adjust by manual, which I've done for this, or go by transient and sort of adjust the sensitivity and so on. So yeah, great way to sort of make these racks that you can reuse in different tracks. So far everything sounds like this. Next up, just a little sort of ambient background texture with the tree Foley. Again, I've side changed to the kick, so it ducks for the kick. Got a bit of auto panning to it, it's moving left to right, some filtering just to carve out the frequencies that I want. But now I wanted more of a hi-hat texture, so I used this one. So this is the Forest Walk texture with fresh air and a little bit of filtering. And the way I've got it to sound like a sort of percussive hi-hat is I've taken this Xander Perk loop, which I've used from the Xander sample pack. I've used the actual sample quite a bit in a few tracks. It's a really nice sort of brushy texture. But what you can do is take the sample, which sounds like this. Again, use an envelope follower to get that profile and map it to the volume of a different sample. So it completely changes the sort of tonal characteristics of it, but you're getting that same sort of tappy pattern without having to, manually try and carve out that sound. Because you're ducking the volume out so quickly, if you put any reverb on, it won't work. It'll duck out straight away. So I put reverb on a sort of group with that track inside it, just so you get that more reverb heavy ring, and then sort of blend it down to taste. And these sort of textures work really well when you've got a more complex track with pads and different atmospheres and sort of synths to bring it all together. For me, it's probably a little bit too much in the minute without more maybe vocals or pads just to fill out the track a little bit more to help these Foley sounds blend in. So as I said, if you want more generative tips, check out this generative video that I made a little while back. If you enjoyed the free pack, please do remember to like, comment and subscribe. I've got quite a few more free VSTs and packs on the way. I'm working on some sampled instruments that I'm going to give away for free, and yeah, lots of other exciting projects on the way, as well as a fresh sample pack which I think fills quite a big gap in the ones that I've got so far. And yeah, thanks for watching. Catch you next time.